Ramona, my only daughter, sent me a bottle of expensive whiskey for Father's Day. No card, no call, just that bottle, delivered like an afterthought. I placed it right in her father-in-law's hand that afternoon, thought nothing of it. 2 weeks later, I found out it wasn't even meant for me. She and that man had used it as symbolic proof to claim I'd transferred my estate willingly. They said I was too old to remember, too soft to care, but I'd been recording everything. By the time we sat across from each other in court, my lawyer had already sent the judge the footage, their faces. When the judge read the letter I filed weeks ago, priceless. This was never about whiskey. It was about who they thought I couldn't outsmart. Stick around and hear how I turned that bottle into their undoing, and comment the city you're watching from, so I know this story reached farther than they ever imagined. The package was sitting crookedly on the porch swing, the cardboard corners softened by the damp June air. No knock, no doorbell, just the quiet arrival of something that didn't quite belong. I picked it up, the weight surprising in my hand, like a book or a brick, something meant to sit heavy. The return address was Ramona's. That should have stirred something in me. Instead, I paused a moment too long before peeling the tape. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, lay a bottle of 12-year single malt whiskey. Expensive, elegant, and wildly out of place in my home. I haven't touched a drop since Nadine passed. 12 years. Almost to the day. I placed the bottle on the kitchen counter and stared at it like it might speak first. Last Father's Day, I spent the evening walking the length of my street twice. Ramona had texted, "Crazy day. Can't call? Rain check?" I'd responded with a thumbs up emoji, not because I was okay with it, but because it was the language she understood now. Emojis, brief texts, scheduled phone calls with calendar invites. Back when she was 16, she used to leave handwritten notes on the fridge. "You're the best, Dad." She used to make burnt pancakes on Father's Day and insist I eat every charred bite. Now, she was mailing whiskey to a man who hadn't had a drink since her mother's funeral. They say gestures matter, but they forget how gestures change. 3 days after the package arrived, her name blinked onto my phone screen. "Hope you like the bottle. Come by Sunday. Dinner's at 6. That was it. No love you. No can't wait to see you, Dad. Just logistics. I stared at the screen for a while, thumb hovering. Finally, I typed "sounds good" and set the phone down. I wasn't excited. I wasn't angry. I was something else. I hadn't found the right word yet, but I knew I would go. Her house smelled like citrus cleaner and new furniture, nothing like the home she grew up in. That one smelled like sawdust and garden tomatoes. The dining room was crowded. Her husband Todd's family, boisterous, loud, polished, filled the space like they owned it. And maybe they did. Eugene, Todd's father, sat at the head of the table like a king on his throne. Ramona clinked her fork against her wine glass and stood. To the man who taught me everything about strength, Eugene. The room applauded. I lifted my glass in silence. Nobody looked my way. Nobody noticed. Or maybe they had. And that was worse. After the cake, after the photos, she handed me the bottle again. It was rewrapped, tidy, like something sacred. "You should open this tonight," she said, smiling. "Thanks," I murmured. As she turned back toward the kitchen, I looked over at Eugene. He was beaming, proud, full of a confidence I once wore. I crossed the room. "Here," I said, pressing the bottle into his hands. "You're clearly the man of the hour. This suits you better." He looked stunned. Ramona turned, caught the moment, her smile freezing. But I was already walking toward the patio, found a chair, and let the voices of the celebration drift away. Back home, the porch swing groaned as I lowered myself into it. The stars were shy that night, veiled behind light clouds. I opened the worn notebook I kept beside the door. "Note to self," I wrote. "Don't mistake distance for disrespect, but don't ignore it either." My handwriting had changed over the years. Smaller now, more deliberate. There were times I thought maybe I'd done something, said too much, or not enough. But silence has a way of distorting memory. And tonight, the silence was deafening. I couldn't sleep. Something about Eugene's toast still echoed in my ears. To the man who taught me everything about strength. That used to be me. I climbed the attic stairs slowly, each step a small protest from my knees. There was a box I hadn't touched in years. Photos, old letters, keepsakes from a life that once fit inside a single house. I was looking for a photo of Ramona and me fishing when she was 8. I wanted to send it to Nellie, my granddaughter. She still called me Pop. She still remembered. But what I found instead was a sealed envelope, my name written in rushed handwriting, Ramona's. The postmark was 5 years old. My breath caught. I never saw this before. The letter's edges were curled. My name was scrawled across the front in a familiar, rushed hand, Ramona's. I hadn't touched that attic box in years. Hadn't even remembered what was in it. But now, standing there in the dusty light, the world narrowed to just that envelope. My thumb hovered at the flap, hesitant. I sat down at the old desk, the one I'd kept tucked against the far wall, still lined with yellowed notes and a broken reading lamp. My fingers trembled as I turned the envelope over twice. I wasn't ready. I wasn't even sure I wanted to know what was inside. 12 years ago, I stopped drinking. That was when Elaine passed. That same year, Father's Day became a polite obligation. A card, a call, if that, never a letter. Until now. Back then, the summer this letter was dated, I remembered clearly. I had pneumonia. Landed me in the hospital for 6 days. Ramona never visited. I didn't blame her at the time. Busy with Nellie, she said over voicemail. But now, I wondered. I broke the seal. The handwriting inside was soft, unguarded, so unlike the clipped texts I'd gotten used to. Dad, I know I've been distant. I'm sorry. I want to fix things. I want Nellie to really know her grandfather, not just photos or holiday cards. I blinked hard. My thumb traced the edge of the page. I read on. I know I've hurt you. I wish I'd said this sooner. Could we try again? I'd like you to come for Thanksgiving, maybe even just a weekend. Parker thinks it's a good idea. Parker. That name slipped off the page like an oil slick. He never encouraged much. Polite, sure, but never warm, never welcoming. Please call me. I love you. Ramona. I read the letter again, then a third time. My chest hollowed. This had been 5 years ago. Why hadn't I seen it? Something didn't sit right. I held the envelope to the light. The flap had clearly been lifted before. Softened glue, uneven edges. It had been opened and sealed again. And the postmark, it wasn't from Columbus. Ramona lived there back then. The ink stamp was local, right here in Dry Creek. I felt my breath catch. That summer, I wasn't even home. I'd been recovering at Sybil's for a week after the hospital. Only one person had keys to my place. Tommy Murnane, Ivy's nephew. He'd been helping me clean out the garage for some pocket money. Good kid, I thought. Quiet, maybe too quiet. Could he have tampered with it? I shook the thought. But then again, people do strange things for stranger reasons. I sat on the porch swing later that evening, letter in hand, replaying the last 5 years, the strained calls, the lukewarm holidays, the invitations that never came. What if she'd been waiting for a response I never gave? What if I wasn't the one who went silent? A pit grew in my stomach. Ramona's coldness. Had it been confusion, resentment, heartbreak, or had someone twisted things between us? And then I thought of Parker again, always charming, but sharp, always polite, but distant. He smiled the way salesmen do, too wide, too clean. I stared at the letter again, lips pressed thin. This wasn't about negligence. This was about interference. I dialed her number. Ring, ring, voicemail. Ramona, I found a letter, yours, dated 5 years ago. We need to talk. I hung up before the beep ended, sat there, watching the phone screen fade to black, and stayed there. Minutes turned to an hour. She didn't call back. The next day, I crossed the street to Ivy Murnane's house. She answered in a worn apron, flour on her hands. Everett, she smiled. You look like you've seen a ghost. I chuckled softly. Just digging through old ghosts in the attic. Found a letter. Strange it never made it to me. Her smile faltered. I told her about the date, the envelope, the resealed flap. She wiped her hands on her apron, voice soft. Todd was around that summer. You remember? He helped clear out your shed. I remember. He was a quiet one. Her eyes flicked away. Todd had a way of poking where he shouldn't. I didn't push, but the feeling was there, coiled tight in my chest. This letter hadn't been lost. It had been buried. That night, I pulled an old photo album from the hall closet, one of those leather-bound ones Elaine used to keep. Inside were faded snapshots, mostly from Ramona's childhood, birthdays, summer cookouts. And then, tucked behind a picture of Nellie at age 4, one I didn't remember seeing. Parker, shaking hands with a man I didn't recognize, both smiling stiffly, like something had just been agreed upon. On the back of the photo, scrawled in ink, "Keep him away from Nellie." My stomach dropped. The handwriting wasn't Ramona's. And suddenly, the letter, the distance, the silence, they weren't the puzzle. They were the fallout. The man in the photo wouldn't leave my mind. His features weren't familiar, but the note scribbled behind the picture, "Keep him away from Nellie," made him unforgettable. My hands were stiff as I turned it over again beneath the soft glow of the desk lamp. The name etched lightly at the corner, R. Dallow, looked like an afterthought. But after what I'd uncovered, I was learning that every afterthought had a purpose. I typed his name into the county database. R. Dallow was listed as a real estate advisor. No social media, no business website, just a few registered LLCs and properties, most of them under odd names. Dusty Pines Holdings, Morrowfield Estates, Blue Hill Partners, all in North Carolina, the same place Ramona and Parker had lived before moving here. The more I clicked, the heavier my chest grew. These weren't just homes, these were shell companies, typical tactics for hiding ownership or money, and if Parker was linked to this man, I leaned back, the chair creaking beneath me, staring at that photo again. There was more to this, more than a distant daughter and a forgotten letter. 3 years ago, Parker had urged me not to visit when they were selling the house in North Carolina. "It's just too hectic right now," he'd said. "We've got it handled." I hadn't questioned it then. I shouldn't have let that slide. Digging through an old email folder, I found a forwarded thread titled Estate Efficiency Discussion. It was all legal jargon, streamlining assets, simplifying paperwork, removing redundancy. My name wasn't mentioned once, not as a co-owner, not even as a father. Parker had been planning a version of the future that didn't include me. My breathing quickened. I forced myself to calm down. Emotions would cloud the facts, and right now, I needed clarity more than comfort. By morning, I was on the road to Marshall Kincaid's office. Marshall was one of the few people I still trusted with the parts of my life I didn't fully understand. We'd known each other for decades, since the days I was still principal at the high school. He'd always been more than just a lawyer. He was a quiet compass, especially when things felt off. He poured 2 coffees before I said a word. "Tell me everything," he said. I slid the photo, the letter, and my printed notes on Dallow across the desk. He scanned them, eyebrows tightening as he read, "Everett, if this is what it looks like, they were lining things up for a future without you." "What kind of lining up?" "Trusts, beneficiary changes, legal maneuvering. If you hadn't updated your will after your wife passed, assets could have defaulted toward Ramona and, by extension, Parker. If you'd died quietly, no one would have questioned any of this." My throat dried. "They were planning to outlive me, legally." He nodded. "They just needed time and silence." On his computer, Marshall pulled up some records I'd never thought to check. There it was, dated a few months after my minor stroke years ago. Ramona had signed a document granting Parker power of attorney over her in medical emergencies. "Standard?" I asked. "Not when she had you," he said. "It bypassed the need to notify you if something happened. From then on, everything could be handled. Internally." I sat back, hearing my own pulse in my ears. How many missed calls? How many visits that never happened? Was she even the one pulling away, or was she being pulled? That evening, as I sifted through thoughts at my kitchen table, a soft knock came at the back door. It was Ivy. She cradled a battered shoebox in her arms. "I've held on to this," she said, voice tight. "Didn't know if I should ever give it to you." Inside were old photographs. Todd, her estranged nephew, arguing with Parker in my driveway, receipts for attic repairs, notes in Todd's handwriting. One caught my eye. "Don't let him find it." I looked up, jaw slack. "Why didn't you say something?" "I thought maybe you already knew," she whispered. "But the more time passed, the less it felt right to keep this." I nodded slowly. My suspicions weren't just suspicions anymore. Ivy hadn't just watched this happen. She'd carried pieces of it all this time, afraid no one would listen. I folded the lid back onto the box, grateful in a way that made my chest hurt. Back inside, I laid everything out like evidence: letter, photos, receipts, names, dates, on the dining table that once hosted family dinners. This wasn't grief anymore. This was reclamation. I reached for a yellow legal pad and began drawing lines. Who had said what? Who had been present? What decisions were made? And when? I wasn't just reconnecting with Ramona. I was unearthing a pattern. They didn't just push me out of her life. They erased me from it. And I was going to write myself back in. The knock startled me. This time, it wasn't Ivy. A courier stood holding a sealed envelope. "Mr. Quaid?" I signed without thinking. Inside, a notarized copy of a legal document, dated 7 years ago. It listed Parker as co-executor of the Quaid Family Trust. A trust I never approved, filed without my knowledge, filed while I was still recovering from my stroke. I stared at the page, the edges trembling in my grip. 7 years ago. They had already started the paperwork, burying me before I was even gone. I looked up toward the window, the dark sky offering no answers. But I knew who might. Someone from Parker's past had to know more. And if Parker left tracks, I was ready to follow every one of them. The return address on the envelope wasn't from Ramona. It was from someone else entirely, a name I didn't recognize, scribbled in tight cursive, Harlan Tesler, a simple name with implications that were anything but. I traced it back to an upscale retirement complex tucked into the northwest corner of town, Marigold Pines, the kind of place with valet parking and tea service at 4. I made an appointment under the guise of being an old friend from his venture days. They didn't ask many questions. Wealth, I've learned, doesn't get questioned, it just gets nodded through. Harlan. Tesler didn't look like a man in his late 70s. His posture was straight, his hair silver and manicured, his eyes too sharp for someone who should have been playing shuffleboard. We met in a bright lounge lined with mahogany bookshelves and polished brass lamps. He offered me a glass of scotch. I declined. We talked about the heat, the decline of baseball, retirement philosophies. It took 20 minutes of fencing before I steered us toward Parker. Father's Day was illuminating, I said, casually. Parker. Harlan smiled, but it was stiff. Smart boy. Never wastes energy on things that don't pay dividends. That line stuck in my ribs. He swirled his scotch. He's always had a head for finance, even when he was dating my daughter. Always 2 steps ahead, you know? I didn't smile back. Consolidating assets, right? Harlan's eyebrows lifted slightly, like I'd just used the right password. That boy could make a foundation out of pocket change. He's got Ramona and Nellie set for life. Says he's bundling it all so they'll never have to worry. He chuckled. Even offered to take care of things here. Once I'm gone. Said he'd manage everything. So there it was, laid bare. Parker wasn't a bad husband or an inattentive son-in-law. He was a strategist, building an empire across 2 bloodlines, Ramona's side, Harlan's side, mine, and the only thing standing in the way, me. Harlan's phone rang. He excused himself and stepped into another room. I stood, slowly, scanning the kitchen that opened into the lounge. On the counter, half tucked beneath a gardening catalog, sat a leather checkbook. Curiosity beat manners. The ledger was open. I didn't touch anything, just leaned forward enough to read. Pay to the order of Tesler Foundation Holding, LLC. An amount $8,000 memo, quarterly installment. Several checks followed, all to the same entity. I pulled a napkin from my pocket and scribbled the LLC number. I was out of the room before Harlan returned. Marshall didn't even need 5 minutes. He typed the LLC number into his database, narrowed the filters, and frowned. Co-signatory, Parker Tesler. He turned the screen to me. This is a holding entity, meant to house assets off record, but within familial reach. It's completely legal, unless it was set up under someone else's nose. You mean mine? Marshall nodded. It sterilizes the chain of wealth. If you died without updating your will, everything flows into Ramona's share. But that share is tied to the LLC, and Parker controls the LLC. So technically, I said, he's not stealing. No, but he's scrubbing your name off the family tree, on paper, at least. Back home, I opened the whiskey bottle, Ramona's gift, poured a glass. It didn't taste like betrayal. It tasted like precision, clean, cold. I boxed the bottle, along with the photo of Parker with R. Dallow. The letter. Ramona never knew I read the LLC printout, a copy of the check image from Harlan's ledger. Then I labeled the box, for Ramona. Eyes open or shut. Your choice. I didn't write anything else. She'd either read it or pretend it never existed, but not before I added one last thing, a note to myself, folded into the inner flap. The absence of malice is not the same as the presence of love. Before I left, I walked across the street to Ivy's porch and slid a handwritten note under her flower pot. If I don't come back by 3, call Marshall. She wouldn't panic. She'd know. Then I drove. The address was one I'd found inside a folder in Harlan's study, back when I was still pretending to admire his whiskey shelf. It was scribbled on the edge of an old document. No label. But something told me it mattered. The house was tucked behind a row of thick hedges just past county lines. No mailbox, just a gravel driveway and a blue door without numbers. I knocked. Silence. Then, just as I was turning to leave, a voice rasped from inside. You're not the first one to come asking about Parker. I froze. So I wasn't the only one chasing ghosts. Good. That meant someone else knew just how real they were. You're not the first one to come asking about Parker, she said, her voice clipped but clear. I straightened up. The woman stood in the doorway, her hair pinned back in a neat twist, her blouse the sort of deep navy you see on courtroom clerks or retired military. There was no smile, only an assessment, like she was measuring me against some invisible chart. You'd better come in, she said. The house was neat, but not cozy. Everything had a purpose. A coffee table with no magazines, a fireplace with no pictures. Just a single oil painting above the mantel, a seascape, waves crashing into black rocks. No softness here. My name's Lorraine Bell, she said as we sat. I take it you're Everett. I nodded. How'd you... She tapped her temple. I can still spot a man with questions before he opens his mouth. Her tea was already brewed, chamomile, unsweetened. She didn't offer me any. I was married to Parker's uncle, Randall. He passed 6 years ago. I was left out of the will. I blinked. I'm sorry. She shrugged. Don't be. I contested it. That's how I started looking into things. Parker was executor. I noticed discrepancies, property valuations, strange routing of funds. When I asked, he said I was grieving out loud. She reached for a manila folder on the side table and dropped it in front of me. I wasn't grieving. I was noticing. Inside were copies of financial transfers, deeds, tax documents, all traced through various shell LLCs, names I didn't recognize. One, though, stopped my breath. Ramona Tesler. That's my daughter, I figured. There, in neat print, was her signature, co-authorized on a transfer of $48 or $1,000 labeled Intergenerational Trust Adjustment. My throat dried. Why would she... Lorraine just looked at me. People lie, or they go quiet and let others lie for them. She stood and returned with an old photo. This was the gala where I confronted Parker. In the photo, Parker stood mid-toast, grinning like a man who already got away with something. To his left, Ramona, laughing, her hand resting lightly, too lightly, on the arm of a man I didn't recognize. Behind them, a banner. Midwestern Future Legacies Foundation. I scanned it again. I thought she never attended these. She didn't, unless she had something to gain. Lorraine leaned closer. They've been orchestrating this for years, Everett. Before the whiskey. Before your silence. She's not a pawn. She's part of it. I didn't speak for a while. The room seemed smaller suddenly. The seascape above the fireplace felt like it was about to drown me. I got home a few minutes before 3. Ivy was clipping her roses, her back straight, her movements deliberate. She looked over, wiped her hands on her apron. Did you find what you needed? No, I said. I found someone worse than Parker. I went straight to my study, locked the door, and opened the safe. In went the photo, Lorraine's folder, and the letter from Ramona. I didn't pace. I didn't drink. I sat still and listened to the silence. That night, I wrote 3 letters. One to Marshall, outlining the connections I'd just confirmed. One to Alma, brief, but filled with the sort of confession brothers and sisters save for the end of long, painful seasons. And one to Nellie. I didn't mail it, just wrote, "If anything happens, I want you to know this was never about hate." It was about being seen. Then I drew a line on my yellow legal pad, dates, names, transactions, arrows, loops, circles. They'd planned a quiet erasure. I would not die invisible. Alma picked up on the first ring. "You were right," I told her. I should have paid attention earlier. There was no smugness in her voice, just concern. "Everett, you're not too late, but you will be if you try to fix this alone. I'm not dragging you into this." "You're not dragging. I'm stepping." I told her everything. Lorraine, the photo, the trust with Ramona's signature. Her pause was short. "I'll be on the first bus tomorrow." For the first time in days, I let out a breath that wasn't bitter. That night, just after sunset, a knock came at the door. No one stood outside, just an envelope on the mat. Inside was a color photocopy of a whiskey bottle, the exact brand Ramona gave me. But the tag? "Happy Father's Day, Lorraine, from Parker," dated 2 years ago. My hands trembled, not from age, but from something colder. This wasn't an isolated moment. Lorraine had been the test run, and I was next in line. I whispered, "They've done this before, and they're about to do it again." The next morning, Alma pulled into my driveway like she'd been doing it all her life. She stepped out with a box of warm pastries and the kind of stillness only sisters can bring. She gave me a look before I even said hello. "You didn't sleep." I closed my eyes. "That's not sleeping." I didn't argue. She placed the box on the counter, then held my gaze until I dropped into the kitchen chair like a worn-out coat. "You're still doing this alone, aren't you?" I exhaled. "Not anymore." The folder Lorraine gave me sat between us like a third person at the table. Alma flipped through each page slowly, her mouth tightening as she scanned. When she reached a document labeled Trust File, R, Quaid, Beneficiary, Minor, she stilled. She looked up. "What's this?" I leaned forward. "That's the first time I've seen it. It's dated 2 years ago, created through Parker's firm." I blinked. "She set up a trust. Through him?" Alma nodded grimly. "You weren't informed. That's not accidental." Somewhere between my ribs, something dropped and stayed there. Alma made a call to a friend at the county archives, and within the hour we were driving across town. The records building was cold, fluorescent lit, and smelled faintly of mildew and lemon cleaner. Alma handled the charm. I handled the name. "Quaid Holdings, LLC," the clerk repeated. "Hold on." He returned with a tan file, thick with stapled papers and fading blue ink. Alma opened it on the corner table. Her breath caught. "Look," she whispered. "Original beneficiary, Nellie Tesler. Custodian, Everett Quaid." Then, another page. Change of beneficiary. Ramona Quaid Tesler. Date of amendment. 6 months ago, I stared at the paper until the lines blurred. "She took it," I said. "She took what I left for Nellie." Alma was quiet a long time. "No, Everett, She redirected something that was never hers to begin with. We stopped at a diner on the way back, mostly out of routine. I ordered coffee. Alma got a sandwich neither of us touched. I stared at my cup, swirling the cream like it might tell me something. She didn't just send that bottle, I said finally. She signed my name without me. Alma nodded. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a maneuver. I shook my head, too tired to feel anything fully. She put her name where Nellie's was. Alma reached across the table. And that's why we fight back. That evening, Ivy dropped by with a folded envelope. Found this stuck between the raised beds, she said. Might have fallen from your porch stack. I took it, already feeling the weight of what might be inside. The letterhead was Parker's, from 9 months ago. Subject line, change of custodianship authorization. The signature? A perfect match to mine. But I never held that pen. I showed it to Alma without a word. Her mouth fell open, then hardened. They forged your signature. I nodded once. My pulse didn't rise, but my skin burned. We sat under the dim kitchen light. Alma laid the pages out like a chessboard. They planned this like a business merger, she muttered. I opened a folder I'd labeled 5 years ago, in case I lose myself. It was meant to guide Nellie through my affairs if my mind ever left me. Now I flipped past the cover page, eyes fixed on the line that read, Trust, intended recipient, Nellie Tessler. I whispered, Well, now it's not just about me losing myself. Alma looked up. It's about me losing her. The next morning, as Alma poured coffee, the landline rang. I answered. Everett, it's Marshall. I need you to come to the office. There's been a formal inquiry into the trust. Your name's on it, but you're not the one who filed the request. I felt the air shift. My hand clenched around the phone. He added, And Everett, this might be bigger than just paperwork. After I hung up, I stared at the folder, the letter, the photo from Lorraine, the forged signature. I didn't know I needed to defend something that was already mine. Marshall's office was dim when I arrived. The kind of dim that didn't come from poor lighting, but from too many truths waiting inside. He closed the blinds as soon as I stepped in. You're early, he said. You said it was important. He didn't smile. Did you sign anything this past year about your land deed? Even a renewal? No. My answer came before he'd finished. He nodded tightly. Then we've got a problem. He handed me an envelope, thick and official looking, and then a single printout. Property reassignment, he said. Filed last December. The top of the page showed my name, Everett Quaid, but the middle initial was wrong. They used P. I don't have a middle name. The signature looked like mine, but it wasn't. They got bold, Marshall muttered. You'd have to know your own handwriting to catch it. I stared at the page until it blurred, then focused again. This is my land. Not anymore. On paper. It's under a sub-holding managed by Quaid Tessler Trust. It's locked under a clause you never signed. My throat tightened. I stared at Marshall, the name heavy on my tongue. Parker? He didn't answer at first. He just leaned back, rubbed his forehead. Then, he processed the reassignment. He never called you, never flagged the error. I felt something shift in my chest, a pressure, a pulse. You're saying he knew? I'm saying he's either incredibly negligent or he didn't want to stop it. I looked at the signature again, so close to mine, so practiced. He let it happen, I whispered. Marshall nodded grimly. And now he benefits from it. Back home, I told Alma everything. She didn't sit down once. She paced in small, tight circles around my kitchen, hands clenched. They think you won't fight, she snapped. They think because you're old, you'll forget. She stopped suddenly. But you remember, don't you? I looked at her. I remember everything they took. She came close, eyes fierce. Then let's make sure they regret it. We didn't raise our voices. We didn't need to. We were still talking when the front door creaked open and Nellie stepped in. She was early, backpack half zipped, cheeks flushed from walking. Why are you two whispering? She asked, peeking into the kitchen. Just grown-up problems, I said, managing a small smile. But her eyes caught the papers scattered on the table. She pointed to one. That's Mommy's handwriting, isn't it? Alma glanced at me. I nodded slowly. Nellie's face scrunched up. She signs the school forms like that. The silence that followed was thick and sharp. That night, I sat at my desk, the lamp casting a narrow circle of light. I opened a blank document, placed my fingers on the keyboard, typed slowly. I know about the trust. I know about the reassignment. I suggest you return my call. I printed it, folded it, slid it into an envelope, but I didn't mail it. Instead, I opened the glass case in my study, placed the envelope behind the bottle of whiskey Ramona had sent me. Let the two betrayals sit beside each other. I turned off the light and walked away. The next morning, the phone rang, a number with no name. Blocked. I let it ring twice before answering. Mr. Quaid, a voice said, you've made some people nervous. Let's talk, discreetly. I leaned back, heart steady. Then say my name again, I said. Silence. Correctly this time. Another pause. Click. I hung up, staring at the silent receiver. If you're going to steal from me, I said to the empty room, at least learn how to fake my name right. I played the voicemail again while the coffee brewed. You've made some people nervous. Let's talk. Discreetly. No name, no callback number. Just that calm, practiced tone of someone too comfortable in the dark. I tried calling the number again. Still full, still silent. The whole thing buzzed like a trap too neat to step into by accident. I wasn't nervous, but I wasn't blind either. A man my age doesn't get a message like that without someone thinking he's already halfway in the grave, and they thought wrong. Ivy stopped by later that morning with eggs and oranges. Bless her. She saw it before I did. An envelope slipped halfway under my front door, white and thick like it wanted to be noticed. You expecting something? She asked. No, I said, already peeling it open. Inside was a formal invitation on letterhead from a firm I'd never heard of. Brighton Legal Mediation, Family Resolution Conference. Friday, 3 p.m. Attendee, Everett Quaid. Signed, with my name. I stared at the scrawl. It was mine, but it wasn't. Ivy leaned closer. Did you actually sign that? I shook my head. They're getting bolder. Her voice lowered. That's the third forged document. Everett. And this one wasn't about stealing. This one was about controlling how I'd react when I found out. I didn't knock when I walked into Marshall's office. Just pushed the door open and dropped the invitation in front of him. They've scheduled a meeting, with me, that I never agreed to. He put on his glasses, read through the invite, then sighed. Same IP routing. Same digital signature. Parker's office again. You think he forged it? I think he let it happen, which, legally, isn't any better. Marshall opened a folder and pulled out 2 more papers. One was a digital confirmation with a timestamp. The other, a scanned image of my signature with the wrong middle initial. Again. They're not even trying to hide it anymore, he said. They want you cornered. I didn't say anything for a long while. Then, good. Let's give them a wall to run into. I showed up at Parker's office with no appointment and a face like granite. His receptionist tried to smile it away. But I wasn't leaving. Parker finally came out. Blazer sharp, hair perfect. He looked like a man who just bought a winning lottery ticket using someone else's money. Mr. Quaid, what a surprise. I'm not here for pleasantries. I'm here for answers. He gestured me into a glass-walled conference room, all minimal and smug. We assumed you'd want to resolve things amicably. A family mediation seemed appropriate. I leaned in. Don't assume anything with my name on it, especially not when you're forging it. He blinked, just once, but it was enough. At home, Alma was pacing before I even spoke. She could read it on my face. You're going, aren't you? Yes. Alone? I didn't answer. She crossed her arms. They've prepped that room. Legal traps. Emotional landmines. You walk in there unarmed. They'll eat you alive. I looked up at her, quiet. Good. I want them full and happy. So they choke when I turn the table. She gave me a look, then nodded. Then I'll be right outside the door. The mediation room was cold, polished, and hollow. A circle of chairs around a glass table. As if any of this was supposed to be fair, Ramona sat with Parker, her husband, and Harlan Tesler, Parker's father. "Glad you decided to join us," Ramona said with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. I didn't respond. I dropped a folder on the table. Inside, a notarized handwriting comparison, dated digital logs, printouts from the records office, and a photograph of Harlan at that same office, with the same clerk Parker used. His jaw tightened when I looked his way. "You helped file the trust, didn't you?" He didn't answer, didn't need to. The photo did the speaking. The mediator, a soft-voiced woman with gray curls, cleared her throat. "Let's begin with intentions." I leaned back, looked at my daughter, looked at the bottle of whiskey sitting in the box I'd brought with me. "My only intention today," I said, "is to show you who really wrote what, and why I won't play dead just yet." Ramona's mouth tightened. Parker shifted. I pushed the whiskey box toward the middle of the table. "You wanted me quiet. Instead, you gave me a microphone." The air outside the mediation center didn't feel like relief. It felt like a warning. Alma sat behind the wheel, arms crossed, engine humming low. "They didn't deny a thing," I muttered as I slid into the seat. "They just redirected. Every question I asked became a statement about my legacy or aging, like I was the one being unreasonable." Alma didn't answer right away. She watched the rearview mirror instead, like she expected someone to follow us. "They're not done," she finally said. "And neither are you." She was right, but I couldn't shake the feeling I'd missed something. I told her I'd forgotten my glasses inside. She frowned but didn't argue. The halls were quieter now. The receptionist off to lunch, the conference room locked. But further down, a wing marked "Administrative Access Only," I caught a faint sound. It was a voice, familiar but muffled, calm, assured, directing someone. I followed it slowly, pretending to check wall plaques. A janitor passed by with a mop bucket and nodded at me. "You lost?" "Maybe just retracing steps," I said. He didn't seem to care. As he pushed through a door labeled "Private, Staff Only," it slowly swung behind him and didn't latch. Inside, I saw Harlan Tesler pacing on a phone call. He was in slacks and a pressed shirt, no tie, comfortable, at home. On a whiteboard behind him, bullet points. One read, "Anticipated objections, EQ, my initials, my confrontation, my script." He'd never left the building. He was staying here, preparing. And that mediation, it wasn't a negotiation. It was a performance. Back home, the edges of the day pressed in like a migraine. I opened my study, pulled out the folder I'd used at the meeting. Something still itched at the back of my brain. Then I remembered. I'd left my pocket recorder running in my jacket, just in case. I scrolled through the audio clips. One labeled "June Mediation" had a few quiet hours. Then, voices. Ramona's voice. "And if he mentions the whiskey, we say it was a peace gesture. Nostalgic, neutral." Another voice, Harlan's. "And if he presses the trust, emotional concern. Say he was grieving. Say we stepped in only to help." My hand gripped the edge of the desk. They hadn't answered anything at mediation. They'd rehearsed every possible response. I played back a short clip. Ramona, "He won't make a scene. He doesn't even raise his voice." Harlan, "That's why we need to control the narrative. Let the mediator steer. If he strays, redirect." I slammed the recorder off. My ears were ringing. They had choreographed me like I was just a confused old man interrupting their show. I grabbed a pen, sat down, drafted a letter. Not to them, about them. "I know what you did, and I know how far you planned it." I folded the page. Slid it behind the whiskey bottle she sent me, still sealed, like a trophy to her victory. Not yet, but soon. That night, just before I turned in, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't pick up. A voicemail pinged. I played it on speaker. "Mr. Quaid, you don't know me, But I saw what happened inside that building. You need to be careful. They're not done. A pause. They've been doing this longer than you think. Click. I stared at the screen. It's never just about whiskey. It never was. The morning light filtered in through the kitchen blinds, catching the amber glint of that whiskey bottle like it was mocking me. It had sat there, untouched, for days now, though it seemed longer. I poured myself a cup of coffee. Black, no cream. The voicemail from last night still clung to my thoughts like wet leaves on a windshield. You need to be careful. They're not done. I wasn't scared. I was tired. And underneath that, I was beginning to understand how tiredness and betrayal made a man go quiet. Not weak, just inward. A knock broke the stillness. Alma, holding a pie. She didn't even say hello before stepping inside. You look like hell, she said, brushing past me. Pie's not going to fix that. No, but it might remind you what sweetness tastes like. She set it down beside the bottle. You haven't opened it? I shook my head. Didn't seem like mine to open. She tilted her head, something unreadable passing across her face. We sat for a while, the silence between us full of unsaid names and unanswered questions. Alma was the kind of woman who let you sit in your storm without trying to fix it, until she didn't. It was a cruel thing, really, she said finally, slicing the pie without looking up. Giving him the bottle meant for Wendell. My fork paused, mid-air. Meant for who? She blinked like she'd just realized she'd spoken her thoughts out loud. Wendell, I repeated, my voice like gravel. As in Pike? Alma's hands trembled slightly. Everett, I didn't mean... But she had, and it was enough, more than enough. I didn't say another word, just stood, walked to the file cabinet in the study, and pulled out the manila folder Ramona had pressed into my hands 3 weeks ago. Estate optimization, she'd called it. The paperwork smelled like citrus and ink, page after page of legal drivel, until one scribble in the margins stopped me cold. Symbolic transfer, acknowledged, J.T. R.Q.T. J.T. Harlan Tessler, R.Q.T. Ramona Quaid Tessler. What had been symbolic was now surgical, precise, cold. I drove to Marshall's office without calling. He opened the door, took one look at me, and waved me in. I dropped the folder on his desk and opened to the scribbled clause. She gave me that whiskey, I said. Or so I thought. Alma just told me it was meant for Wendell. Look here. Marshall adjusted his glasses. His face tightened. He stood, walked to the back shelf, and returned with a locked folder. This came through my office 2 weeks ago. Confidential tip. Inside were screenshots, email threads between Parker's assistant and Tessler Holdings. One subject line stood out. Gift clause justification, executed symbol transfer. I said nothing. I didn't have to. The evidence was talking plenty. Marshall turned to his monitor and clicked open a folder labeled Private Mailroom, BLDGC. The video was grainy but clear enough. Ramona entered the frame, holding the whiskey bottle. Harlan Tessler met her in front of a mailroom drop bin. Ramona smiled and whispered something. Then, loud enough to catch, "This will be the last piece." She handed him the bottle. He passed her a thin folder. They hugged. And just like that, she was gone. My stomach churned in quiet recognition. It was a transaction, a performance, and I'd been the audience too late. That night, I tried writing her a message, typed it, reworded it, deleted it. In the end, I said nothing. I stepped outside, the bottle in my hand, and sat on the porch where Wendell and I used to drink the real stuff, where truth wasn't tampered with. I was never the intended recipient, I muttered. The label stared back at me. Later, alone in the dim light, I found my thumb peeling at the edge of the bottle's label. Idle hands, just trying to feel something solid. But the label peeled too easily, and beneath it, faded, barely readable, another one. Property of Tessler Holdings, not for distribution. I read it 3 times before I believed it. The whiskey hadn't been hers to give. It was his all along. I didn't hand that bottle to her father-in-law by accident. I handed it back to its rightful owner. And that, more than the signatures, the files, the whispers, That's what broke me. It was almost midnight. I sat out on the porch, the same spot I had been in when that bottle of whiskey first arrived. It hadn't moved much since, still sealed, still cold in the center. I didn't need to taste it. I'd already swallowed the meaning behind it. The label underneath the label had said it all. Property of Tesla Holdings, not for distribution. It wasn't just the gift that had never been mine. It was the message, the positioning, the way they'd passed it like a baton in a race I wasn't invited to run. It wasn't the bottle, I murmured into the night. It was what they were trading behind my back. The next morning, Ramona showed up. No call, no warning. Just 3 raps at the door and the sound of her heels like war drums on my hardwood floor. She stepped into the kitchen like she still had jurisdiction. A faint smile played on her lips, but there was steel behind her eyes. "I figured you'd be up," she said. I didn't reply. I poured coffee into a second mug and slid it across the table. She didn't touch it. "I know what you're doing," she said finally. "You've been feeding Nellie your poison, haven't you?" The air cracked. "She's a child," I said, calmly. "She's my child," Ramona snapped, voice rising. "And she doesn't need your narratives, your paranoia, your drama." I haven't said a word to her about anything that wasn't already true. Her eyes narrowed. "You think you're clever, but you're making her choose between us." I shook my head, the burn in my chest harder to contain now. "No, Ramona, you already did that." We sat across the kitchen table like 2 attorneys preparing closing arguments. She leaned back, legs crossed, staring at me like a chess opponent 4 moves from victory. "You really believe anyone will take your side?" she said, tapping her nails on the table. "They'll look at your age, your scattered papers, the bottle of whiskey, and they'll believe what we tell them to." I folded my hands. "Is that a threat?" She smiled faintly. "Consider it inevitability. The paperwork for conservatorship is being filed. Tesler's already preparing it. You'll need a stronger pen." She flinched, just barely, but I saw it. A creak from the back door. Nellie. She hadn't gone to school. She stood frozen, backpack slung over one shoulder, her face pale. "Mom?" Ramona turned quickly, alarm flickering in her voice. "Nellie, what are you doing here?" "I heard you," she said, voice shaking. "Everett, sweetheart." "No." "I heard her and Grandpa Tesler, last week, in the den. They said you were forgetful, and they could use that some doctor would help them make it official." Her voice broke. "They said it would be easier if people thought you were slipping." Ramona stood up, hands in the air. "That's not what you think." "You lied to me," Nellie whispered. And in that moment, the house was silent, not from lack of noise, but from the sharp break of something sacred. Trust. I walked over, wrapped Nellie in my arms. Ramona stood by the door, jaw clenched. "You can forge documents," I said without raising my voice, "but you can't forge a soul." She stared at me, wounded pride seething in her throat. "Let's see what the judge thinks." I smiled. I already did. After she left, I walked to my bedroom, opened the drawer, and pulled out the letter. Sealed, addressed, Hahn. Judge Whitaker, personal. Marshall had helped me draft it a week ago. I hadn't known everything yet, but I knew enough. I held it up to the light, then slipped it into my inside coat pocket. I turned to face the mirror, not for vanity, but for certainty. "By the time they arrive," I whispered, "I'll already be waiting in the courtroom." It had never been about the whiskey. It was always about what they thought I was too old to fight for. They arrived like royalty, the kind with snakes tucked in their sleeves and smiles polished by years of practiced manipulation. Ramona wore a pearl gray pantsuit, sharp as her tongue, and Mr. Tesler stood beside her in a navy overcoat that likely cost more than my truck. From the courthouse steps, I watched them strut past the granite columns, talking like they'd already won. Me? I came alone, holding nothing but a brown envelope and 20 years' worth of memory. They thought they were playing chess. I was carving the board. Judge Whitaker was already seated when we entered. No theatrics, no introductions, just a nod, and then, Mr. Quaid submitted this sealed affidavit and attached exhibits 2 weeks ago, in anticipation of today's hearing. Ramona's smile twitched. Inside the envelope, certified handwriting samples, notarized bank trails, time-stamped footage from the mediation building, and a signed statement from Nellie. Marshall had helped me gather it all, quietly, legally. He knew where the pressure points were, and as the judge read line by line, those points cracked open. Ramona's hands curled into fists. Tesler reached for a handkerchief that wasn't there. "This is a court of law," Judge Whitaker said. "But what I see here is not just fraud. It's a betrayal of blood, of duty, and of dignity." For once, I didn't need to say a damn word. Ramona couldn't hold it. Her voice tore through the courtroom like a wind snapping wires. This was all planted. He planned this. The judge leaned forward, stone-faced. "One more outburst, and you'll be escorted out." She sat down, trembling with rage. Tesler glared across the room, but I didn't blink. I just sat there, legs crossed, still as granite. Funny how upright a man can feel when he finally stops carrying what doesn't belong to him. That night, I didn't feel like steak or speeches. I roasted a chicken with lemon and thyme, baked cornbread from Alma's old recipe, and poured everyone a tall glass of sweet tea. At the table sat Alma, Ivy, Marshall, Nellie, and me. Nothing grand, just warmth, just peace. When the plates were cleared, I handed Nellie a folded letter. She hesitated before opening it. Her eyes moved across the lines, then widened. "It's in your name now," I said. "The house, but not for you to live in. It belongs to the Quaid Tesler Foundation now, for kids who don't get second chances." She covered her mouth. Alma reached for her hand. "You gave me everything, Grandpa. I don't need—" "You'll have your own name someday," I said. "But it won't be from what I left you. It'll be from what you chose to carry." She nodded, tears on her cheeks, smiling. Then I pulled out a small velvet case. Inside, Wendell Pike's old fountain pen. "Because truth," I said, "is still written, even when people try to erase it." Later, the cicadas sang louder than my thoughts. I sat on the porch in the same chair from the beginning, same view, same sky. But this time, Nellie sat beside me. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The bottle of whiskey, still sealed, was gone from the table. I'd poured it out this morning, not in anger, not in shame, just because I didn't need it anymore. "She gave me whiskey to forget," I said softly. "I gave her fire to remember." This war hadn't been won with yelling. It wasn't won with fists or threats. It was won in the quiet, in the files, in the letters, in the way an old man learns to outwait a storm. My daughter tried to define my final years, but in the end, I wrote my own conclusion.